Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we are going over all things DFS, attacking that main slate here in the upcoming Sunday for Week 10. As always, I am joined by none other than PFF's own Andrew Erickson. The prop prophet himself is back. Andrew, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. I may or may not have burnt the top of my mouth when I went aggressive after some soup last night for dinner because I was really hungry, and I needed to let it cool down a little bit. So I'm fighting through the pain right now.
Playing through the pain. Hurt, not injured, Andrew, and you're proving the difference in that today. As always here, people, we're going to go through our potential cash lineup at first, then hit some tournament plays for those that aren't big fans of DFS. You know, a lot of what we are going through is all salary-based. So if we talk up someone that, we are really in on this week, not necessarily, a huge player that we're necessarily super in on in redraft land. So starting things off with cash, talking about head-to-head games, the 50-50, just formats. We are trying to build the highest floor possible, not caring as much about ownership. We'll get more on that with the tournament plays. So Andrew, as always, you send me over your plays usually in the morning on Thursday. I basically go through mine and then look at yours, and I think it's again a pretty straightforward cash week, at least in terms of what we should do in our top 5, top 6 spots. At quarterback, I know our motto. It's been Jalen Hurts or just Jalen Hurts. Like, we'll make money with Jalen Hurts. We won't make money with anyone else. But Andrew, we do have one Carson Wentz, $600 cheaper, facing the Jaguars, and we got the natural stacking buddy Michael Pittman costing just $6.3K. Are we riding with the Colts stack this week?
Yeah, I think Wentz makes a lot of sense where he's priced down below $6K. And there was a lot of directions you could go with at the quarterback position. I kind of found myself first, I always look at Hurts first because that's just what I do. And I'm like, all right, does he make sense here? But then I was like, there's a lot of ways where you can find value here, especially with running back, where we could have basically a 3-down back under 5K, which is going to open up a ton of salary for other positions. But I mean, you can't deny what Wentz has been doing. He's been so consistent. You don't necessarily need a super high ceiling from him if you're playing him under 6K. It lets you jam in a bunch of other studs. So I didn't originally start with Wentz as my cash quarterback. I like Dak Prescott. At 6,900, I liked him more in the environment against the Falcons. And I really think you can't go wrong at a lot of places. But if you want to pay down, go to Wentz. Again, he's now 17. At least he's got at least 17 fantasy points in all but one game this season. You want to lock in 17 fantasy points, you're going to get that from Wentz, and that makes sense at his price. He's thrown multiple touchdowns in 6 straight games. He's missing the birth of his child potentially to play against the Jaguars, so he better deliver. If he sucks and he misses his child's birth, the man upstairs is not going to be okay with that, Carson Wentz.
And Carson is super religious, right? This is a great storyline, Andrew. One of the most important things we could possibly bring up here. I do agree there are other options. Wentz at 5,900, based on some of the early builds I've done, I do like it because, as we'll get to these other guys, I think that gives you the easiest path to really paying up more of that last flex spot. But hey, if you're fine with getting a Cordero Patterson, DeAndre Swift type instead of, a Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, you can go up to Dak and stack him with CeeDee Lamb, or even go all the way up to Tom Brady at 7,600 and Mike Evans. I guess with Brady, again, just seeing kind of how the rest of the lineup shakes out, I am a little bit worried about that. And at some point, Andrew, if he is going to be down AB and potentially Chris Godwin, I get it, we'll jam Mike Evans in everywhere, but I do wonder if, that could just be a little too much for Brady to overcome. I'm not saying Washington's going to beat them or anything, but in terms of, cash game, usually we don't like having such an immobile quarterback in the first place. And if Evans is really the only high-end guy he has out there, and Gronk's not looking great to play either, that's, I guess, where I'd be hesitant paying that far up for Brady in cash.
Yeah, that makes sense. We love Brady because he has all these weapons, but we've also seen him, saw him with the New England Patriots when he didn't have weapons. He doesn't play nearly as well, and that's not his fault. That's why he's good, because he works well with all these weapons. And if it is only Mike Evans, that does kind of limit, his potential ceiling if he's the only show in town.
Feeling good about Wentz. Now looking at running back, Andrew. You buried the lead a little bit. We mentioned our savior this week, D'Ernest Johnson, just 4.7K. We need to see if Nick Chubb is going to be out of the picture. We know Kareem Hunt is still gone. Chubb does have the chance to return those negative COVID tests and be ready to go by Sunday. But honestly, Andrew, if D'Ernest, okay, all right, As always, people, we do our Friday evening injury podcast. Make sure you guys check that out because we'll have a lot more clarity here, because at the exact same price point, we got Devin Singletary, where Zach Moss is also in question. Started the week off with a DMP in the concussion protocol. Was able to get that non-contact jersey on and participate in Thursday's practice, though. So Moss does have a chance of returning. The Bills are facing the Jets' league worst defense and fantasy points per game allowed the position. I mean, this is where we can save salary, Andrew, because I want to get up to those 6K wide receivers. If there is a spot other than tight end defense where we can go down the pricing scale, it's definitely to Dearness Johnson or Devin Singletary.
Yeah, and I think that, at least with me, I think it's pretty clear if I was going to play one of them, it would be Dearness over Devin Singletary. Just the thing with Singletary, I almost kind of wish Zach Moss plays so I don't have to play Devin Singletary because I know where the trap is here. And it's just the Bills just don't give him the ball ever, and they just throw every single time. And it doesn't even matter that he's facing a defense that allows the most fantasy points to running backs by 10 points per game. Like it's insane the margin between the Jets and the second worst team, which is the Lions, who we're going to talk about really quickly as well. But I have that concern that they just don't feature the running backs. Let's say Matt Breida just takes over what Zach Moss's touches would have been. Like, that's not out of the range of outcomes. Whereas if Dearness Johnson is he's the only running back on the team. Like they signed Brian Hill off the practice squad, but he's not going to have any significant role coming off the street. So I feel really good about Dearness, but not nearly as thrilled to play Devin Singletary. But I also know it's a volume play. Like, he should see the volume and the matchup is there. So I'm going to have to begrudgingly play him, and I'm not going to feel good. But then I'm going to know if it doesn't work. Like, I know exactly why.
I will say, because over the past few years, it hasn't been great for Singletary, even when Moss and before Moss, Frank Gore were out of the picture. They would just elevate TJ Yeldon to the active roster and kind of split things. In week one, when Zach Moss was a healthy scratch, though, 11 carries, 5 targets on a pretty robust 75% snap rate. So most recent example, 1 game sample size. Obviously we've seen plenty of wrong come from trusting those in the past, but at least it does seem like Singletary should be the fairly undisputed lead back, certainly capable of catching passes. Caught 7 of them last week. But yes, Andrew, I'm with you. Hopefully Nick Chubb is healthy enough to be back in week 11, but we can get that Dearness Johnson play and not have to worry about Devin Singletary. So otherwise, Andrew, do we want to go in on just Najee Harris? I guess my only kind of my question is do we want Najee or Deontay in cash? Because with obviously Juju's been out, now it's looking like Claypool could be missing time as well. I mean, Ben, we've seen him already concentrate targets enough, but at the same time, I am nervous about putting 2 Steelers pass catchers in the same cash game lineup, even if we are facing the Lions of all freaking teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I'm picking between those 2 guys, I'm still going with Najee. I think over Deontay. I just looking at potential game script. But let's say the Steelers get up and they don't have to throw the ball; they just decide to give it to Harris, and it's not even the fact. I mean, Deontay's obviously. He already had the highest target share basically among all receivers, and now Claypool's out. But it's okay, how much higher is it really going to get? It's already pretty maxed out.
All of it, Andrew.
He could get 14 targets in this game and still be okay, he's got to find the end zone. So I actually like Deontay more as a tournament play, with Najee Harris, playing them. I think because you're right. I think people are going to put them together and be oh, this is gross. What am I doing? So I think that's actually more of a tournament strategy, playing them together. But I think for cash, Harris, 24 touches per game is number 1 in the NFL. First in expected fantasy points per game. And it's funny, I looked at the PFF projections, and Harris is projected for 5 more points than the next closest running back. It's not even close, the type of workload he has based on every other running back, based on the matchup. So I think it's far and away Najee Harris as the cash game lock at running back.
Would you go Deontay over Metcalf straight up, even having Najee there, or would you rather have Metcalf?
I think I would rather have Deontay. We saw last week what happened with do you have Mike Evans in that lineup too? I know Mike Evans is in that kind of price range too. Okay. Yeah. That's
a tough one for me because, we got Wentz, we got Pittman. I agree. Dearness and Najee should be the guys. I also think probably James Conner, man, at just 6,300, taking Chase Edmonds out of the picture with that ankle injury. We'll see a little bit more of Benjamin, but honestly, if we were going to see a true split committee, that would have happened last week. And before that fourth quarter of that blowout Cardinals win, it truly was the James Conner show. So to see him at just 6,300, that's kind of who I'm looking at in the flex. And from there, we can really fill out with these high-end 6K wide receivers. Is that kind of where you're looking at, Andrew, or is there a different running back you'd like to get in here?
I like paying up at running back. I like jamming as many like running back studs as I can. I still like Dalvin Cook. I know that he's got some off the field stuff going on right now, but all indications are that he should be suiting up to play, and he's playing the Chargers defense, the defense that can't stop anybody on the ground. And we have this run team that likes to run the football with Dalvin Cook. So I get like Jonathan Taylor like up there as well. I think there's ways where you can play Harris and Taylor and Cook, like or Cook, like playing both those guys with Dearness as the savings running back. So that's kind of the way I like looking at getting the two pricey running backs plus Dearness, and then just taking in some of those lower receivers.
The 2v2 that I think we're kind of talking through at this point is going to come down to that wide receiver and flex spot. Let's cut through the shit here, Andrew, because we got Gerald Everett at 2.6K. That's our cheap tight end of the week. Before the Seahawks bye, we saw him regain that every down role, essentially. I think his snap rate was like 78% or something like that. The role he had before he got put on the COVID list that we were very happy about, but obviously got on the COVID list, came back. Now Geno was there. But to see Everett, a truly talented tight end at 2.6K, I mean, this is like that week where we played Will Dissly with Everett out, but like we didn't feel good about that. I actually feel good about Everett at this point, and you can get up a little bit more. Arnold's still under 4K. Adam Troutman, with Jawan Johnson being a random healthy scratch, he is in play at 3K, but I don't think there's any need to get up in those guys. Just get Everett at 2,600. And then at defense, you can get super gross and go with the Jaguars. I do think you can get up to the Titans at 2,600, facing either Trevor Siemian or Taysom Hill. They are at home. The only other defense cheaper at home is Washington versus Tampa Bay. We are not doing that. So with that in mind, we have Everett, we have Tennessee. Obviously, we already have Pittman in that wide receiver 1 spot. Mike Evans, I think, should be locked in here with the injuries going on and just with this matchup against Washington. Can't cover anybody. Yes, they can rush the passer. When you're facing Tom Brady, second quickest release time in the league, don't think he's going to get there. So, Andrew, assuming we kind of have that same general build, it sounds like you're leaning towards paying up for Dalvin Cook or someone like that, maybe even Austin Eckler, Jonathan Taylor, not the worst idea in the world, obviously. And then that kind of gives you something around that 5.5K range to finish off the lineup in that last receiver spot. Who are you kind of looking at in that range? Or do you just have a different kind of build in mind altogether?
No, it's exactly kind of how I got things set up. And my favorite like 5K receiver, because after like under 6K, there's really not a lot of receivers I like. I kind of went through thinking, okay, I usually have like a list of like 6 or 7 guys that I are viable. I'm like, all right, between under 6K and above 5K, there are like 2 receivers I like will probably end up playing. And so one of them I think is Jerry Judy. At 5,300, I'd like Jerry Judy a ton this week. He's my number 1 ranked Broncos Broncos wide receiver, 29% target share in his second week back from injured reserve. I like the matchup here against the Eagles. I mean, the Eagles have just been one of these slot funnel defenses where they're really good at protecting the outside against the perimeter, but they're getting beat by tight ends or they're getting beat by slot receivers. Last week we saw it with Keenan Allen have a monster game. They've allowed the highest passer rating to opposing wide receivers that are lined up inside, 135.1. And Judy is starting to come back. And Courtland Sutton has disappeared. Like in the games that Judy has played, Sutton has been a non-factor. If Darius Slay is okay from his injury, I assume that we're going to see a lot of Slay on Sutton, which is going to be a matchup that Teddy Bridgewater just looks the other way. He probably just won't even look towards Sutton like he has done whenever Judy's been on the field. So I think Jerry Judy makes a ton of sense here. And now that he's back fully healthy from injured reserve, I feel really confident playing him at his price tag.
3 games this year with a healthy Jerry Judy with the Broncos. He has 19 targets in those games. Tim Patrick has 12. Noah Fant has 11. Alberto has 11. Courtland Sutton in 5th on his own team, just 9 targets. I'm not saying he's going to be behind both tight ends forever, but clearly, and we expected this, man, going into the year. With Teddy Bridgewater under center, Judy is going to be that guy more weeks than not. And I also just think that this really could be similar to what we saw Keenan Allen do last week when you're facing such a zone-heavy defense like the Eagles. I mean, they've given up some big plays because they faced some pretty damn good quarterbacks this year. Obviously got ripped up a little bit a few times, but I do think the Keenan Allen type, the Jerry Judy type, capable of sitting in those zones and just winning on more of the yak plays, like that's the guy you expect to go off in this matchup versus the bigger play wide receiver like a Courtland Sutton, like a Mike Williams. So, Andrew, I'm feeling pretty good about this right now. Again, we got some injury situations to hash out and see where it goes, but the Wentz and Pittman stack, quarterback, Dearness, Najee, and probably I think Eckler is standing out to pay up for at running back. Then Mike Evans, Jerry Judy at receiver with Gerald Everett and the Titans to save some salary. Any final cash game thoughts?
No, I think the Packers and Seahawks game, that is a late game, correct? Like they're playing. So so you're going to know by the time Gerald Everett even plays whether you're going to win or not. So it doesn't even really matter what he does for the most part as a Seahawks, because you're going to know, because chances are Gerald Everett's not going to save your cash team. So yeah, I think the tight end play with Everett, I get it feels kind of gross, but the routes run per dropback was there, like you said, before the bye week. And that was something I remember just like doing, was like, I need to pencil this away while he's on the bye week, because people forget, people forget about these teams coming off buys, and he's got Russell Wilson back. So I think this is the highest upside he could have. It's the highest upside tight end you can get probably at 2,600. So I like the call. Real quick, would you rather have Eckler or Devante Adams? Because or do we have that room? We do not have that room. Never mind. So a moot point, Andrew. I do think Devante is a little cheap this week, just 7,900. I mean, this guy was at 9K a couple weeks ago. But again, when we have Evans, Pittman, even Deontay, if we want to go there, just $1,000 cheaper, I don't feel the overwhelming urge to get up to Devante this week. No, I just don't like the Packers-Seahawks game. Like, I just don't like that game. Like, we talk about this, like when you first see that, you think Rodgers, Wilson, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks, like, all right, sweet, shootout. And then you're like, pace of play, gross. Because both teams are just so slow. Like, they're not playing in shootouts. And when you have one team that's slow, the only way to get them to play in a more up-tempo offense is for the other team to like drive the narrative and make them play fast. But they're playing Seattle, which doesn't do that either. And Russell Wilson is coming back. Both these guys are coming back off of extended time. We saw Prescott come back off extended time and look horrible. So that's why I think that game in particular is kind of like one of the fake, like it's a game I really don't like a lot as like a stacking game. It's something I think there are a couple one-offs I like, because obviously there's talented players in that game, but it's not a game I want to stack. And I think that it makes Devante Adams riskier, even though he has such a high target share. I mean, there are other guys that we have, like Deontay Johnson, like his target share is actually higher than Devante Adams, and he's way cheaper. So those are my thoughts kind of on Adams. Yeah, my Mismatch Manifesto article I do every week, one of the things I look at is combined situation neutral pace in the matchups. And 3 slowest ones of the week: Jaguars, Colts, Browns, Patriots, and Seahawks, Packers. Pretty clear which one you wouldn't expect to belong there, but alas, here we are. So yeah, I'm with you, man. So okay, that is going to sum up our general cash game thoughts. Now with tournaments, obviously we are down to take more risk. If you want to go with a Russ Metcalf, bring it back with Adam stack, that's okay. I mean, fun quote from one of my just mentors over the years and truly great fantasy analyst, Matthew Friedman. And he does great stuff to this day, but he made a good point, in some random like RB breakdown, like week 15 of 2016. Contrarianism is not a license to be an effing moron. So we do got to remember that not every single play that we come up with in a tournament is, hey, it's a tournament, we can do whatever. So don't want to quite be an idiot, Andrew, but I do think it does give us a lot more, obviously, maneuverability. So starting things off with quarterback, I want a ton of this Vikings-Chargers game, because really, when we look at these guys, I thought the Vikings, who were my favorite stack really last week, they had things going for them. They just didn't get the volume, had a kick return touchdown, a couple things didn't go their way. Were able to play with a lead a bit more than anticipated. And I think if you just look at what's been going on in these offenses, like Justin Jefferson, it's ridiculous, like 9 targets over the past 2 weeks combined. That's not going to stick for the entire year. And when you look at all the wide receivers people can get down from up top, I think he and Adam Thielen are guys where people are just going to look at the guys around them, your Deontays, your Mike Evans, your CD Lambs, pay for those guys instead of the Vikings receivers. And for a tournament, I am down to take that risk. And it's so easy to bring it back with Keenan or, Andrew, Mike Williams, who is finally affordable again. I get it. We've had a couple down weeks, but you look at the guy's snaps, he's still playing an every down role in a great Chargers offense that, has been feeding Keenan Allen for a few weeks, but I just don't think that's necessarily going to be an every week occurrence, particularly against a Vikings secondary that we've been trying to tee off on all season long. So I also think that going with the Matt Ryan, Cordero Patterson, Kyle Pitts stack, where like you're getting his top 2 receivers without rostering a single wide receiver is a pretty fun time. And then we obviously talked about Tom
Tom Brady before, although not loving that if he is going to be down multiple high-end weapons. Andrew, I know you're with me here, at least on the Minnesota side of things. Do you want to put Cousins with both Jefferson and Thielen, or do you think you can maybe just do one?
I think you could probably just do one. Something I've been trying to do more of is look at the winning lineups in the GPP contest I'm in. I kind of want to see what was the construction here? Why did this roster win? Was I on these plays? Was this totally galaxy brain? Okay, this guy just got wicked lucky, playing some guy I've never heard of, or was it there a systematic approach here that was really good? And something I've noticed is that there, at least the tournaments that I've played, a lot of single entry stuff, there really hasn't been a lot of over stacking and not a lot of just double stacks with a bring back. I know it's kind of the standard quo, just kind of throw it in, but I don't think you always need to necessarily do that, especially when looking at Kirk Cousins. He's not really more of a volume passer. It's more of an efficiency type of passer. So you're looking for touchdowns. So I almost kind of like Cousins with a Thielen or Jefferson and a Conklin, get that tight end equity, which is always attached to touchdowns anyway. So I think that's it. And he's also in a good matchup. He was something that I think is kind of a cash viable at 3,400. Again, if you have the money to move up, if you just don't feel like Everett, I think Tyler Conklin makes a ton of sense. He's really been really efficient this year. He's been really highly involved in that passing offense, and it's a good matchup against the Chargers, who are not good against tight ends. So Kirk Cousins, I think, like the matchup for him, something else I've been doing as well is looking at not necessarily fantasy points against, but looking at particular coverage schemes for these defenses and looking at, because quarterbacks can be just tough. It's really about efficiency. They can throw for X amount of yards and they just don't get there in fantasy because they don't throw any touchdowns. You really need to get that efficiency. And Kirk Cousins, I've noticed a lot this year, just kind of looking more at it, been really good against cover 1 and cover 3. That's why he had a pretty productive game last week against the Baltimore Ravens. I know he had the rushing touchdown, but it could have been a passing touchdown too. So, don't come at me quite yet. I get that. But the Chargers are similar defense in that manner. So cover 1 and cover 3 look. So I know that the fantasy points per game allowed by the Chargers doesn't look great for Kirk Cousins, but the scheme is favorable to him. And that's why we always think about how did this quarterback, do this against this defense? And it's probably more or less related to the type of defense they run is more favorable, and the same reason why quarterbacks bust sometimes when the matchup on fantasy points actually says they should do better. So Kirk Cousins is PFF's 3rd highest graded quarterback against cover 1 and cover 3. So yeah, and in this game, it's supposed to be paced up. You have two teams that are running set at the top of the league in terms of plays per game. It reminds me a lot of Kirk Cousins playing that Baker Mayfield role when the Browns played the Chargers, a game where we were there's nothing's going to happen. It's Mike Williams, 2 80-yard touchdowns. That's what I could see playing from this game. So I like to call with Mike Williams. And then, Kirk Cousins is someone I like at 6,100.
Moving on to running back position. One thing we talk about almost every time on this show is just how easy it can be to create contrarian tournament lineups by looking at what the easiest lineups are to construct and then doing the opposite of that. And Andrew, I think it's pretty clear this week that there's so much value in the lower parts of the running back position that paying up could give us an edge. And I mean paying all the way up. So, right now we know Dearness is there. We know Singletary's there. But the way Damien Harris and Ramondre Stevenson are going, I do think Brandon Bolden at 4,400 is going to end up being a viable play. And we even got Alvin Kamara, who hasn't been able to practice all week. And that could leave Mark Ingram at 4,500 as someone else that is going to fetch a lot of salaries. So, yeah, people want to have these 4K running backs so we can get up to all the ballers in the 6, 7K range at wide receiver. And then you can also pay down at tight end. That's it, people. That is the easy way to build a lineup this week. So, Andrew, let's do the opposite and get Christian freaking McCaffrey under 9K. Yeah, it's a bad matchup, but who cares? We have a running back that can catch 10 passes. Phillip Walker's under center. Any week that people are off CMC, I'm just not used to seeing this. Our usual rule of thumb with when Derrick Henry, not trying to bring up bad memories, people. I'm sorry. But, whenever we had Henry on his slate, it was is the whole public on him this week? Okay, we're going to fade and cross our fingers. Is the public off him? We're going to get on it. I feel like with CMC, he's someone that always has the high projected rostership. But right now, with our projections, just 4%. Let's get him in every tournament lineup, man.
Yeah, no, I was really the first thing I did was I was writing up CMC and I looked at, all right, what's the field doing? I was really curious to see okay, what is going to happen? And 4%, I was really surprised because I don't think I've really ever seen it this low when he's been, 100% healthy. He probably is right now. So I guess the thing with me is I don't know why the field is so gun shy on McCaffrey. You know, I was watching that game. Obviously, they were playing the Patriots last week, so I was watching that game really closely. And I mean, he looked good to me. Like, he was breaking off some nice runs. And I know he only played 49% of snaps, but he had 18 touches on half the snaps played. Whenever he was out there, he got the rock. 5 targets, 38% target rate per route run. He's not going to play 49% of the snaps again. If anything, it's going to go up. So he's going to see, okay, right around probably 24 touches. So the usual CMC workload. So I was confused about, you know, why. I mean, if this was last week, okay, I totally get that. Why is it 4%? That makes total sense. Like, coming back from injury, we don't know what's going to happen. And that process would have been right because he played 49% of the snaps and did definitely not score enough fantasy points to pay off his salary last week. But we saw that week, and everything was encouraging. So I don't really know why he's at 4%. So yeah, I'm going to play CMC.
I love it. Get up to CMC. And I also just think there are some other ways to get around the chalkier running backs we're seeing. We got Michael Carter at 5.6K, DeAndre Swift at 6.8K. Disappointed the last time people saw them. Now they're off. They remain 2 running backs on terrible teams that each have a chance to catch 10 passes during any single game. I mean, last week, the problem for Carter was that Mike White, captain checkdown, got hurt. Josh Johnson came in, started throwing the ball down the field. Mike White's back. So, yeah, they're playing the Bills. I'm not telling you to play a single other Jet on this slate. Please, for the love of God, don't. But, realize Michael Carter, he has that crazy 8 to 10 catch upside that made him a top 6 back in consecutive weeks before last week's dud. And with DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams continues to not be practicing. So, yeah, the matchup isn't ideal, but they have the freaking cheat code tiebreaker for this matchup, and that is the receiving upside. So, I don't think I had any other major notes here for tournament plays, Andrew. I know that you want to talk a little bit about these Packers running backs. And, you know, Seattle, I think a lot of people like to really attack that secondary, but at the same time, if Devante Adams is just contained a little bit, offense needs to go somewhere. Seems like it could go through both Jones and A.J. Dillon.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Jones has these games, like, his production's like pretty up and down for the most part. You know, he has these games where he scores like 50 points. Like, he just absolutely blows up, and then he goes quiet for a couple of weeks, and he blows up again. And it just seems like a blow up spot for him. Like, his rostership's not really, really high because he's kind of in a he's like weirdly priced. He's like not up there with all the bell cows. And
it's like the same. It's why I'm on Swift. They're right next to each other because people are either going up to Zeke or Eckler and higher, or they're just settling for Connor and Fournette or CPAT.
Yeah, so I think that he's in a cool price range where you can get him a little bit lower rostered. And I mean, the matchup is there. You know, Seattle's defense is horrible against running backs, 3rd most points allowed, and they're really bad against running backs in the passing game, which is how Aaron Jones hits his ceiling. Like, the Aaron Jones boom games are because he has 6 catches for 60 yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Like, that's what you want. And the Seahawks, bottom 7 in the league in receptions, yards, and targets to running backs. And I get why people are somewhat like concerned about Jones because A.J. Dillon is getting more involved. He's averaged 14 touches per game over his last 5 weeks. So that's also why I think, as a pivot off of these really, really chalky lower price running backs, you know, if A.J. Dillon outscores Dearness Johnson, outscores Devin Singletary because he has a monster game, like, I don't think people look at A.J. Dillon and don't think, oh, he's a backup running back. But, you know, 14 touches for a backup running back could be literally what Devin Singletary sees as a starting running back. So, and he's going to be so much less roster. I almost feel better about like A.J. Dillon straight up over than Devin Singletary, just because I think that he's the better player. And I mean, the Seahawks defense, like, their worst game this year was against Derrick Henry when they were playing against the running back. So, you know, A.J. Dillon is one of the closer guys to Derrick Henry comp that we have, one of these bigger guys, Quadzilla himself. So A.J. Dillon, especially as a late swap opportunity, if you're trying to make a pivot, I think that A.J. Dillon could be a really interesting guy.
You know, if it was dark out and like he had a hood on, you might confuse the two. I don't know. They got some pretty big thighs out there. Moving on to wide receiver. It's Justin Jefferson, man. That's my favorite wide receiver play on the slate. I know he has a chance to go off any given week. He had a long touchdown last week. It's just a matter of these targets correcting themselves. And in this matchup, man, like, it's just hard to see him really busting here. Looking at the Chargers, they do have a good pass defense, but Michael Davis, starting cornerback, is again not practicing with the hamstring. It looks like Asante Samuel Jr. is going to make his way out of the concussion protocol, and he better, because their starter in his place, Ryan Smith, is also not practicing with a knee injury. We got the squeaky wheel narrative going on, Andrew, which again, it's kind of wild because he did have that long touchdown last week, but even the Vikings realized that 9 targets in 2 games is not enough for one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Per Vikings OC Clint Kubiak, you don't want to come out of games with Justin having those type of targets. What's going to happen? They're going to feed him all the targets he can handle, and they might need to in a game against the Chargers that they're going to have to keep pace. So again, I'm going to try to center a lot of these tournaments around the Vikings-Chargers game stack and then going off from there. I also think that looking at those, upper 6K receivers, Evans, Deontay, and DK, going up just a little bit more to CeeDee Lamb, I think could make a lot of sense. I don't think he's going to be going completely, under the radar. He's not going to have sub 5% rostership or anything like that, but that's okay. If they're at 10%, they score a bunch of points, that's perfectly fine, everyone. We don't need to be shooting for every single person on our tournament lineup having sub 5% ownership. CeeDee Lamb coming off a week in which he led the entire NFL in unrealized air yards, truly with 2 better balls, could have had long touchdowns, facing a Falcons secondary where, yes, AJ Tyrell been playing fantastic this year. Only Jalen Ramsey is a higher graded cornerback than Tyrell for the Falcons. He's not following number 1 receivers. The Cowboys move theirs all over the formation, so don't be dinging like the perceived matchup of A.J. Tyrell on CD any more than you would on Amari Cooper. This is still a Falcons secondary that is not a unit to fear, particularly against the Cowboys, who until last week we all were treating as, and probably still are, the best offense in the NFL. And with that, Andrew, we do also have Michael Gallup sitting at just 4K. What we talk about, or a good way to differentiate our lineups, do the opposite of the normal roster construction. People are paying up at wide receiver, will pay down at wide receiver, get up to CMC otherwise. So I think Gallup at 4K, James Washington at 3.5K if Claypool was ruled out. I liked Rondale Moore at 4.4K. He didn't practice on Thursday, so we're going to need to keep an eye on that. Maybe get up a little bit to Christian Kirk. But yeah, man, I think potentially paying down at wide receiver and up at RB makes some sense. And just, again, for 2 guys, though, I do love Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb going off this week. Now, looking at some of the guys you got, you're with me on Justin Jefferson and Gallup, which I love to see. Now, Terry McLaurin, I actually love this call, Andrew. I was shocked when I was doing my wide receiver cornerback article, which you guys can always find on PFF.com. I'm pulling up the numbers now, but he has been such a boom or bust wide receiver this year, man. And Andrew, that's basically what we want to play in these types of tournaments. Like Ricky Bobby said, first or last. And I think Terry gives us that possibility. I know it's not the easiest matchup, but hey, he's posted 3 top 5 fantasy finishes this season, and he's failed to finish higher than 45th during his other 5 games. So we're either going to get a killer game and we're in contention, or we're not. But that's who we should be trying to play in these tournaments.
Yeah, I think that he makes a ton of sense. Maybe it's obvious, you do a Tom Brady double, you bring back Terry McLaurin as the bring back option, but not enough people do it. So at 7,600, again, he's not at a price point where he's cheap in any way, shape, or form, but the volume is there. 6th ranked, 26% target share this year. He's 2nd ranked in terms of air yard share. So whenever they're going downfield, it's always going to Terry McLaurin. So whether it's there by garbage time, he gets there with Heineke, or Heineke just kind of does some ad. Look, Heineke, the one game he played, the reason he's on the team is because he balled out against the Buccaneers last year. So if there's anyone that has, the Bucs number, quote unquote, maybe Taylor Heineke can create some magic. He's obviously done it a couple times this year with McLaurin. Like you said, he's kind of had a couple of boom weeks. So that's what you're kind of hoping for going with Terry. I do want to hit on Justin Jefferson, a point that I made, talking about the way that the LA defense runs their coverage. So cover 1 and cover 3. That's where Jefferson has been absolutely deadly. That's where he's got a ton of his targets. 36% target share, 88 PFF receiving grade, 3.8 yards per route run. So yes, I'm definitely with you on the Justin Jefferson call. I did want to also mention, I thought this guy was probably kind of valuable in cash. It just didn't work with the way we had our lineup kind of being built, but I guess that also means he's a kind of a turn. So Tyler Johnson for the Buccaneers. So he actually had a really decent game last time the Bucs played, filling in for Antonio Brown. He had 5 catches on 6 targets, running around 60% of Tom Brady's dropbacks. And if he's out there, I think that he's also a viable option. If there's no Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, only one of those guys needs to miss for him to be the number 3 receiver. Now, I will say Scotty Miller, potentially coming off of IR does throw a little bit of a wrench in it. So I get why maybe that would get you off of him in a cash format, but he's still going to be potentially the number 2 receiver. Gronkowski looks like he's questionable. I really don't think Godwin or Brown are going to play in this game. So Tyler Johnson's going to be running all the routes with Tom Brady as quarterback in a plus matchup. So at 3,400, Like, he's probably the cheapest receiver I can actually swallow, like, going down to, because everyone else after that is really gross. Ian, I think I want to have some fun with you. So I actually went down and found 4 3K receivers that I just kind of like wrote up. I was like, all right, I'm going to ask Ian which of these gross 3K receivers he would want to play or feel the least gross about playing. So I'll list off the names here. So we got Anthony Miller, who is on the Steelers. He's on the Steelers practice squad. I assume that he'll get activated because Chase Claypool is going to miss this game. At least that's what I think. So Anthony Miller.
No,
Antoine. Not dude, against the Lions, 77 receiving yards.
It's going to be Deontay, James Washington, Ray McLeod. Like, that's their starting 3 receivers. I love Tony Miller. I've drafted him on way too many season-long teams over the last few years. But no, who are the other 3?
Antoine Wesley, so the Cardinals wide receiver that filled in last week.
It moved a little bit for him. Go.
Anthony Schwartz, so ran the same amount of routes last week as Donovan Peoples-Jones, just didn't have the big plays. And then Scotty Miller, who would potentially be activated off IR.
Okay, I think the answer is no to
I mean,
all
yeah,
of
they're
them,
all pretty terrible, but at least 3.
Schwartz is viable. I saw that he was banged up after the game, but he is not in the injury report, so I guess he is actually okay. You know, he gets the same air yards that Donovan Peoples-Jones does, so I don't hate that call. Wesley, AJ Green is, I think, going to be back this week, so my concern would be he's the odd man out. We did see Zach Ertz's snaps in the slot reach a high with the Cardinals last week. I think it could easily just be Kirk, Green, Rondale. We'll see if Rondale's playing, and then Zach Ertz. So I wouldn't love Wesley. I talked about Miller. So probably Schwartz. I mean,
I just think that the Peoples-Jones things was great. I just feel like Peoples-Jones is screaming the 2 catches for 17 yards game. Like, I feel like that's like going to happen, and it's going to be Schwartz that just breaks off like an 80-yard touchdown because he's got the same upside. Like, he's got that speed. And I think when you did your wide receiver cornerback matchup chart, is J.C. Jackson going to be on Peoples-Jones? Or at least that's what I would assume.
Patriots haven't actually been shadowing since week 5, which is surprising. They're usually one of the teams that does that more than ever. I think they should be seeing about equal amount of each other. Look, J.C. Jackson, like, I wouldn't even necessarily consider that too big of a downgrade. I mean, look, JC, he gets all those interceptions. Like, that should make up for him getting burnt from time to time. But it's also just, to me, like, he's one of those cornerbacks I'm less worried about because he does tend to give up some big plays as well. I guess the only other, the 2 guys that I like, I think you nailed Tyler Johnson. Like, he's the answer under 4K, particularly if we're losing Godwin too. Like, Tyler Johnson is, I think, specifically in a best case scenario, Chris Godwin's backup. Now, he has been the number 4 receiver because Scotty Miller has been on IR. But if we take Godwin out, like, that's going to be Tyler Johnson as their full-time slot receiver. It'll be Scotty and then Brashad Perryman on the outside. So with Perryman probably being in the picture now, that's what kind of gets me off of Scotty. So I think Tyler makes a lot of sense. And if we really want to get gross, Andrew, you want to go there. What about Marquez Valdes-Scantling? I know he played behind Lazard last week, but we got returning Rodgers. We got a Seattle secondary that we know can give up a big play or two. And for MVS, now second game coming off the injury, I mean, if you want to just talk about like absurd air yard potential, we know he's going to get 2 or 3 bombs downfield. We also know he could very well catch none of those and leave you a goose egg, but at least we have a guy that will be catching passes or at least be getting targets from Aaron Rodgers in a winnable matchup.
I'm going to have so many dead DFS lineups that I swapped to MVS on the late window games. Be like, oh yeah, this lineup sucked because it wasn't MVS's fault. He was my late swap option. So of course it didn't work out. I can't go a podcast without mentioning my guy, Deontay Harris, because again, always pops in the wide receiver quarterback matchup chart because he has PFF's second highest graded wide receiver. It is a small sample size, but the guy gets fed targets. Like, I don't know why it is. I don't know why the Saints love him so much, but he has the second highest target rate per route run. Now the issue is he's not running a lot of routes, so that's why he's somewhat problematic. But at 4K, I like him. You know, if Gallup gets a lot of steam, I think that Deontay Harris kind of makes a lot of sense. I mean, every time I talked about him, he either gets out and he has 7 targets in his last 3 healthy games. 38% target rate per route run, like I mentioned. So in the Titans defense, like we've seen them give up big games to receivers. I know they've been better as of late, but he's really their quick screen guy. Like he's the guy that they get the ball to behind the line of scrimmage. And if Kamara is banged up, then we could just see more of Deontay Harris with Traquan and Marquez Callaway acting as the more traditional receivers going downfield. So yeah, Deontay Harris.
Deontay Harris is number 1 with 12 targets during Trevor Siemian's time under center this year. Lo and behold, Andrew, here we are, Deontay Harris, Saints number 1 wide receiver in Week 10. Yeah, I don't disagree that the guys you named are some of the better sub 4K options, but honestly, I think I might throw some darts at Tyler Johnson, James Washington, if Claypool is indeed going to be out. Otherwise, though, let's go to 4K. We can get Deontay. We can get Gallup. You can go up a little bit potentially to Rondale. We got A.J. Green coming back off the COVID list. Like, there's enough guys sub 5 that you don't have to go completely down into the dumpster. And I think that will probably be most of the tournament spots that I am looking at. I also see here, Andrew, one Julio Jones not listed on injury report this week. We haven't seen the blow up happen just yet, but there is a chance. Now, A.J. Brown, I think, might fetch shadow coverage from Marshawn Lattimore. We haven't seen Marshawn do this consistently this year. I know he got beat a couple times by our guy, Olamide Zaccheaus, last week, but overall on the year, people, Lattimore has been pretty awesome. He held Devante Adams, 56 scoreless yards. Terry McLaurin, 46 scoreless yards. Metcalf and Evans got loose for a long touchdown. Evans could have had 2 with a better ball for those counting at home, but both guys only targeted 5 and 4 times, and largely other than the one big play were held in relative check. So if they do have Lattimore track A.J. Brown or even just kind of move more of their coverage there, maybe this is the week that Julio Jones finally starts looking like the guy we know he can still be.
Yeah, I feel like Marshawn Lattimore plays a lot to his competition. Like when he's matched up against like an alpha, he like brings his A game, and then when he plays against like scrub guys, he just kind of like takes the day off.
We all do it in video games, you know. Marshawn's doing it in real life. You got to respect it.
So yeah, Mount Julio. It's time. It's eruption is happening for Mount Julio. It's going to happen. Like he just has these games where everyone's off him. Everyone's on A.J. Brown, rightfully so. A.J. Brown's gotten super high target share over the last 4 weeks, but Julio's not going to continue to suck because he doesn't suck. He is still efficient. PFF's 20th highest graded wide receiver this year, 16th in yards per route run. So when he's on the field, he's been efficient. The issue this year has just been he's not been on the field that much, but he's fully healthy. Like you said, 84% routes run per dropback rate in week 9, which is his highest since week 2, which was his best game against the Seattle Seahawks. He should have scored a touchdown in that game. It was wrongfully called. He should have higher numbers than he has. So I think he makes up for that touchdown here against in this matchup against the Saints. They've allowed the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers this season. And yeah, he's not going to be on Lattimore. So I like Julio Jones.
All right, Andrew, let's finish things off with some tight end talk, and then we can talk about the news that just broke. Odell Beckham Jr. signing with the Los Angeles Rams. I don't love it, but let's talk about that right now. What the hell? Screw it. We'll get to tight ends in a second. The Rams, man, I wanted the Packers or the Chiefs. Like, he'll probably, split some time with Van Jefferson.
Isn't this why Deshaun Jackson didn't want to play for them? Because he wasn't going to play?
God, why?
That just seems really odd to me. Like Deshaun Jackson literally asked to be released from this team because he wasn't playing enough, and now they bring in OBJ he's going to play more. Then that's honestly really surprising to me that he went to the Rams. I guess like maybe he was okay with it. He's like, I don't care. Like I'll play the Deshaun Jackson role, and I just want to win a ring. Like I don't know. Like what's his deal?
He is their number 3 wide receiver, definitively. At best, Van Jefferson, who made Deshaun Jackson, who made Tutu Atwell before he got put on IR, really stay in the background. Like, there's a chance we only see Beckham being used in that D-Jax 15, 20 snaps. We'll throw you one deep ball a game role. Beckham will be awesome at it if you just want to make him be this overqualified one-trick pony field stretcher. I'm not saying he can't do it, but for fantasy, man, like this is rough. It hurts Van Jefferson, who was already a boomer bust wide receiver 4, and for everyone, including myself in a couple leagues, that was holding on to Beckham, really hoping that he could provide some resurgence down the stretch here. It's going to be tough, man. I don't think we're going to be seeing many target games, like even over 5 at this point. Like, I would say hold him for a week. Let's see what these snaps look like. Let's see what Sean McVay says. But Yeah, I don't like this, Andrew. Green Bay, he was going to be the wide receiver 2 and probably the number 2 pass game option. Kansas City, he would have been the wide receiver 2 and number 3 pass game option. Now, like, hopefully he's the number 3 pass game option, but there's some hurdles there.
Yeah, and I think too, to like try to draw some comparisons, Antonio Brown last year when he signed with the Bucs, like he didn't immediately become fantasy relevant, and it was confusing at first. Like we were trying to figure out like parse between him and Evans and Godwin, and maybe there's an injury here that we're not aware of. I know Robert Woods was on the injury report last week, entering the game. I know he didn't practice, so maybe this is a insurance policy bringing in OBJ. Maybe we see Robert Woods' snaps like decrease. I don't know. Like maybe we see more of a rotation between Woods, Van Jefferson, and Odell Beckham too. Because obviously the Rams have Super Bowl aspirations. Like they don't care about the regular season as much. They want to win the Super Bowl. So bringing OBJ makes maybe take some of the load off of those other guys. I think obviously Cooper Kupp is still going to be, the man because he just gets schemed touches and targets his way. But yeah, it's definitely not exciting for fantasy.
I will say, so you get the 49ers this week. Hard to kind of imagine OBJ maybe even suiting up for that one, the way things are. They get a bye in week 11, gets to learn the offense. After that, Andrew, Packers, Jaguars, Cardinals, Seahawks, Vikings, and Ravens down the stretch. Are we back in now? That's like the best schedule you could even ask for. He gets the Vikings second. Like, all right. Everyone that's just saying, why are you guys still talking about him? He has 200-yard games since 2016. Like, for the love of God, people, take it from us nerd fantasy analysts. Watch the freaking film before you just say he's watched. I know everyone saw the Denver game where he got hurt halfway through, wasn't even like supposed to be active in the first place. That's the lasting memory everyone has, not the 3 weeks before that where he got missed for 3 potential touchdowns against the Vikings. He had 79 yards against the Cardinals, 77 against the Bears, like 2 pretty good defenses in their own right. Again, more of just an issue about volume than anything. No, he's not the same guy from 2016, but that guy was arguably the single best receiver in the NFL. Like he can be 80% of that guy and still a potential wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 in fantasy land. I don't see that coming though with the volume issues at hand. Like I would say, Andrew, like he should, if you have the roster spot, keep him, because if Sean McVay decides that he wants to make OBJ a big part of this offense, that's going to be huge. It's just not the most likely scenario. So if you can keep him through the bye, good, but I don't think he needs to be. If it's a matter of like taking a 0 out of position in a big game or not, like, yes, you can cut him.
Yeah, I think that I would probably, I don't think even need to cut him because, the way we're talking about this, obviously, we are probably more pessimistic and trying to be realistic about, what his expectations are. But there are people, OBJ is still a very popular player that a lot of people still like and that see with rose-colored glasses. Like, I would just try to sell him high. And obviously, like he could be worth more value than he ends up being. Like you trade him for, but I think you could just probably move him now. Like people will convince themselves, oh, like Rams high-powered offense, like this is gonna work. Even though like especially trades for receivers going to different teams half the time never works, yeah. And especially during the season itself, like I'm very doubtful that we're going to see this really pay off, especially early on, especially if you need wins like now, like OBJ is not going to help you right now. And maybe down the stretch, like we see like Antonio Brown did with the Bucs, like he was fantasy relevant a little bit down there to the stretch. Maybe that happens with Beckham. If there's an injury, okay, boom. Like he has that handcuff potential, kind of like Van Jefferson. Like that's why Van Jefferson was a guy we wanted to have on rosters because he had a handcuff. What if Woods gets hurt? Oh, okay, boom. Now OBJ is the number 2. Okay, that's great. So yeah, I see there is a path for him, but I think I would just try to flip him now for whatever I can get.
I think I got it figured out now. This is like when the Seahawks signed Josh Gordon for the first time, and it was like, great name. We're happy for Josh getting to play with a great quarterback. We're happy for OBJ going to Stafford, having McVay, but too much target competition ahead. Not enough evidence of any sort of high-end production, let's face it, in quite some time for both guys. Probably someone that we don't need to be investing much time in fantasy land. But you could imagine, and if OBJ goes off, I'm going to be rooting for that dude each and every step of the way. Back on track, though, Andrew. We got some tight end talk. With no Kelsey, with no Andrews, and no Waller on this slate, it is pretty wide open. We got Kyle Pitts there no Kittle as well. Jeez. Kyle Pitts sitting there at 5.8K. Again, I think Matt Ryan, Cordero, and Kyle Pitts is just like pretty unique in that you can stack this guy with 2 essential. CPAT does line up more as a running back than a wide receiver, but 2 guys that do play plenty of wide receiver are the team's top 2 pass game options. Obviously not not designated as wide receivers. So Pitts under 6K as a number one pass game option, I think makes a lot of sense. If you want to get off, likely chalky, Tyler Conklin, Dan Arnold in that mid 6K range, look at Ricky Seals-Jones. Logan Thomas, tried to come back this week. He was sore after the Monday workout. We'll see. If he's active, obviously you can't play RSJ, but in this Tampa Bay matchup, same things we said about Mclorn, potential to bring it back with someone, maybe RSJ is that contrarian guy. And then again, it's gross. Maybe I'm just still trying to will some of those July best ball teams into getting their act together. But Adam Troutman, low-key, has been playing a lot more recently. Like Juwan Johnson was stealing the touchdowns. I don't know why he was a healthy scratch last week, but he was. And you look over the last 2 weeks, 13 targets for Adam Troutman. He's played at least 86% of the offensive snaps in 4 straight weeks. Like, we talked ourselves into guys like Cole Kmet before, these cheap, every down tight ends that aren't completely atrocious pass catchers. I think that's what Troutman can offer in this spot. I'm not saying to go crazy with it. I just think based on kind of where this ownership's going at this low tight end range, that he could offer you some value. Andrew, I see that you are looking at Troutman a little bit as well. We talked about Gerald Everett. Tommy Sweeney, if Dawson Knox remains sidelined, he does have an every down role.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the play behind it. He has an every down role, and he's playing the Jets, and they're going to score points. Jets have been one of the worst teams against tight ends this year. And I know Sweeney hasn't done that much, but, everything I've done, all the research I've done when it comes to routes run at the tight end position is that's a projector of more targets in the future. Like, that's really what we're looking for and what we're chasing. Like, you have to kind of take a leap of faith if the targets really haven't been there to start, but that's where you start. You got to look at routes. Like, you got to run a route to get a target. And no, Tommy Sweeney in his first 2 games has not really seen that many targets in the offense, but okay, he's a number 2 tight end. But it's a really good matchup. He's really cheap. If Gerald Everett somehow becomes the chalky guy after we've hyped him up on this podcast, then okay, you get off the chalk by getting to Tommy Sweeney at the same price. So 2,600, I think he makes a lot of sense. Pitts as well, I just want to hit on. I was trying to look at Pitts' usage in terms of his target share, his air yard share to receivers. Because I think that when you look at him, you can't look at him like a tight end. I get you can put him in your tight end slot, but don't really view him as a tight end. I know you've hit on it, how he does not line up in line. I think he's around 80% is slot or out wide. And it's only 19% of the time he's lined up in line, second to only our guy, Mike Gesicki, who's at 5%.
Freaking Mike. People taking this as a negative with these guys. I think Gesicki is awesome. I've actually been one of, I wouldn't go full Stan truther mode, but one of these guys I've played in so much preseason DFS, hyping up the guy. He is a freak. He is every fantasy analyst's wet dream when you look at his athletic profile and everything like that. It's just one of these things. Why I hated Ty Montgomery's number for so many years. When you just have these complete aberrations going on, I need to address it, Andrew. It's my job to the people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. But with Pitts, his target share is 23% over the last 4 weeks. That's the same as Michael Pittman. Michael Pittman is 6,300. Pitts is 5,800. His air yard share, 39%, which is first among all tight ends, is at 39%. So it's the same as Justin Jefferson, as Tyler Lockett. So these guys that we view, Jefferson's at 7,700, Lockett's at 6,500. Pitts is underpriced. If he just had the wide receiver label, people would probably play him more in general. Yeah. So I think that's kind of why you just don't really view him as a tight end. You can play 2 tight ends and have Pitts in your flex because of the way that things can set up. So I know that the 2 tight end formula has really always been suboptimal, but that's because you've been playing 2 actual tight ends. In this case, you're not actually doing it. You are playing a wide receiver. So just keep that in mind when you look at Pitts. Really look at him as a wide receiver and compare him to other wide receivers. If you're looking for a receiver to add to the flex, you have around that, you're looking in that 6K range, make sure to also consider Pitts there because he really should be in that 6K range based on how he's being used. And then for my other tight, so Schultz at 5,500. I like what we saw last week. His usage went up a ton without Blake Jarwin, 91% routes run per dropback rate. We saw the Cowboys just go full-blown 11 personnel. 82% of their snaps were from 11 personnel, which was significantly up over 30% from the first 8 weeks of the season. So that's why we like Gallup, because we think that we're going to see this team just run 3 receiver sets, 1 tight end, because that's where they have their best players on the field. So Dalton Schultz, every down player. Falcons have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to tight ends of the last 4 weeks. He's in a weird range, 5,500, and it's the touchdown. So with him, I really think you should play him with Dak because you need him to connect the 2 touchdowns, which is what he's done the most this year. That's kind of where he's had his spike weeks, because other than that, like, he's not going to get there alone, like on yardage or like a ton of targets and receptions. So you need him to connect on a couple touchdowns. So I think he makes sense in DAC tournament lineups.
Odell watch maybe continuing. We got some national reporter beef going on. ESPN's Adam Schefter reported OBJ is expected to be an LA Ram. He said he's finalizing the deal. Mere 5 minutes later, Kim Jones reported that Odell Beckham Jr. tells her that he is on the fence between Rams and Packers. So
go to the Packers, OBJ. Come on, man. I'm
usually, I give Shefty the nod in these type of close calls, but come on. Be wrong this time. Give us OBJ to the Packers. I'm sure this will probably be cleared up by the time everyone is listening to this on Friday morning, regardless. Okay, so yes, defenses real quick. I just think, again, I usually try to list some like running back defense stacks that I think you can do that are a little bit different and give you plenty of upside. Leonard Fournette with the Buccaneers defense going up against Washington. Everyone is looking at the Buccaneers passing game. Maybe they run the ball so much more with all these injuries they have going on. Fournette is also someone that catches far more passes than most people give him credit for. Devin Singletary with the Buffalo defense. I know it's not great. We want Dearness Johnson, but again, if we can just separate ourselves from that much of the field by going to the same price back, who isn't set up as well, but could outscore the guy. It could happen. I don't hate that call. James Conner and the Cardinals defense going up against PJ Walker. Don't need to explain that one much. And just like, Andrew, we didn't even talk like much about Jonathan Taylor here. I know how much of a smash bar it is. The guy's been crushing it. He's facing the freaking Jaguars. If we take him and that Indy defense, I think that gives you plenty of upside as well in a week where maybe everyone's getting a little bit too cute looking at Carson Wentz and Michael Pittman. Any final thoughts on defense?
No, I just mentioned the Packers as well. So I know I talked about like the Green Bay running backs, Dillon and Aaron Jones. So pairing them with the Green Bay defense, like, Russell Wilson could come out and literally be terrible. Like, it's totally possible that, he's not recovered fully from the finger thing. Something goes wrong. He throws a bunch of interceptions. Geno Smith comes to the game. Like, there's a lot of scenarios where you can see it playing out, and they also play in the late window. So I like having that flexibility of being able to move around my defenses, when I've already seen the 1 o'clock games kind of play out. So I think that Green Bay at 2,900, they're in the middle tier, not a lot of rostership for them. So I think that they make sense. And then Jacksonville, I know we hit them in cash, but I mean, they rank third in pressure rate this year. Third. Like, I feel like everyone's talking about how the Bills are like falling apart. It's like, hey, maybe give some credit to the other Josh Allen and the Jaguars defense that like played really well. Like, come on. Like, it's not just, the Bills are crumbling. It's like, okay, maybe they just played a good defense that like played it. I mean, look, Urban Meyer doesn't have that much control over the defense. Like, I he's really more operating on the offensive side of the ball, and give credit to the Jags defense. It's playing much, much better than people will give them credit for. So, I mean, Carson Wentz, we know that he can make mistakes when he's under pressure. He just does stuff with the ball that you're just like, what is he freaking doing? He actually leads the league in turnover worthy plays since week 7. So yeah, I mean, he is not going to see the birth of his child. So maybe the man upstairs is not going to be pleased with Carson Wentz, and he's going to throw a pick.
The only reason we didn't go Jacksonville in the cash build was because when we have Wentz and Pittman, that's not really optimal to be trying to play a defense against them. But yeah, man, in tournaments, they are absolutely the cheapest one you can get down to at just 2,200. And you said it, man, the way Wentz does tend to hold the ball when things go south, certainly a candidate to have one of those 4-5 sacks games. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we had one of the worst interceptions any of us have ever seen. Certainly, not the guy that's going to go a full 60 without making a mistake or two. Andrew, it's time for our favorite stack of the week. I have already made, I think, my voice known with that, but I'm going with Justin Herbert, Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and bringing it back with Justin Jefferson. Going to cost some money, but my goodness, man, we could get 5 combined receiving scores out of this group. Herbert's always a candidate to go for 300 plus, rack up 3+ scores himself. I just think this Vikings-Chargers game has the makings of a back and forth shootout between these two loaded passing attacks, and going with that construction, I then think you'll be able to fill it out with some cheaper mid-range guys and be able to still have plenty of upsides in tournaments of all shapes and sizes. What is your stack of the week, Mr. Erickson?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Brady doubles, because he's literally the quarterback 1 in fantasy points per game. A non-running quarterback is the quarterback 1. It's absolutely unbelievable. So Brady, Mike Evans, Tyler Johnson, assuming that we're not going to see Godwin or Antonio Brown, I'll bring it back with Terry and hope that he has that 30-point game that we know is in him, and it just has been lacking the last couple of weeks. So I'll go with the Bucs stack. It seems like if you've been playing TB12 doubles all year, you're probably making a lot of money. So I'm just going to keep it up.
Ain't broke, don't fix it. Not for the main event. The prop profit, he's 10-5 on the season. Everyone, you got the Justin Fields over last week. I hate that the Bears had to have a bye. We didn't get to really go into how good Justin Fields was on Monday night a little bit more, but nailed that one. Dallas Goedert finished, I believe, 5 yards under. And my goodness, man, he should have gotten the over in the first drive of the game. Jalen Hurts missed him on what could have been a 50-yard touchdown. So process was just fine with Dallas Goedert. He's someone that continues to, I think, be on the verge of a true breakout without Zach Ertz. We just haven't seen it yet. Andrew, what are the two props, if not more, of the week that people can go win some money on?
Yeah, so nothing gets me going more than Dan Arnold overs. So we got Dan Arnold sitting tight end for the Jacksonville Jaguars, over 38.5 receiving yards. So Dan Arnold has been one of the most consistent tight ends, receivers, whatever you want to call him this year for Jacksonville. I mean, the other guys just really aren't nearly as involved. Agnew, Chenault, Marvin Jones. So Arnold's running a route on 70% of the team dropbacks the last 4 weeks. You know, he's got top 12 tight end usage. He has 17 targets, 120 plus receiving yards in his last 2 games. And he's failed to clear 60 receiving yards just once as a full-time starter for Jacksonville. So he's at 38.5. So I like the usage. The usage alone dictates that he should get hit over this 38.5 receiving yards mark. And then you look at the matchup, Indianapolis allows the 8th most receiving yards to the position this year. So I like the over on Dan Arnold. And then I'm going to go under here because unders just tend to be more profitable. And if you just take more unders, you're probably going to win more props. Stefan Diggs. I just think his lines have not been adjusted to kind of his newer role as not, this target monster that he was last year. Look at his target share this year, 22%. To last year, which is 29%. It's down 7% since 2020. So I just don't think the lines have adjusted. 85.5 receiving yards. He's only done that twice in 8 games played this year. He's only been over 85.5 receiving yards twice. So I get the Jets defense. It's not great, but it's really been efficiency, not necessarily volume that they've been giving up. Teams are just running the ball over them so they can not necessarily give up a lot of receiving yardage. So they've only had 2 receivers crack over 90 yards this season. So Stefan Diggs in this newer role where we're not seeing him see as many targets, as many receptions. I know his catch rate is down significantly from last year as well. I'm going to go under 85.5 receiving yards. I think it's just too high.
Diggs under 85.5 yards. Dan Arnold over 38.5 yards. It's a good point on Diggs. I actually didn't mention this in our wide receiver tournament plays. I think I got distracted by the OBJ news breaking. But how about Emmanuel Sanders this week, man? I know he hasn't been booming lately, but he still has more total air yards this year than Diggs. He's in the mid 5K range. Like Beasley's the one that seems to actually be fetching most of the ownership, which makes sense. He's been the one playing more recently. But hey, the Jets defense has been okay this year. They're not horrendous. We can kind of put them in that Jaguars group of maybe a little bit better than people give them credit for. It still wouldn't shock anyone if Josh Allen gets back on track, throws for 5 touchdowns, and Emmanuel Sanders is that field stretcher.
Yeah, no, I think Emmanuel Sanders makes a ton of sense. I mean, someone's going to blow up in this game. I mean, we should see a bounce back for Josh Allen, but they're just spreading the ball a lot more than they did last year. And honestly, I wouldn't hate if they just went back to Diggs more. Like that's what worked last year. And that's what I think what they probably should do. But alas, they got to get the ball to Sanders and Knox and Beasley. So it sucks.
They had, some of those stats on Diggs' comebacks like last year were just absolutely insane. Like he was like doubling up the next closest guy in yards and catches on those hitches. It was just automatic each and every week. So they got to do something, but I'm confident they'll figure it out. It helps when you got the number 1 defense in the league in EPA per play as your offense is struggling along. Chiefs wouldn't really know anything about that. People, hope you enjoyed the podcasting. And also, right now, you can get 25% off any PFF subscription if you use code FANTASY. Grades and data are live for every single player logged to Snap last week. Go check out the highest graded players from Week 9 and much more. You can get all of PFF's locked article content, weekly player rankings to help you set your lineups, strength of schedule for every player, NFL and college football betting dashboards, our Greg-powered projections and cover probabilities, and much more. Again, support the podcast and use promo code FANTASY for 25% off any sub. And also, NFL fans hungry for a big win this week, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, has you covered. New customers can bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game. And if they do, you win $200 in free bets. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code PFF. Bet just $5 on any NFL team to win their game and win $200 in free bets. If they win, you win with promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit, $1 wager, 1 per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. And also, whether it's football success or financial savvy, the right questions help set the stage for winning strategies. Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to share insights that can help put you ahead on both your fantasy and financial scoreboards. Want to hear about Chris's old playing days or behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about a need to know for your financial future? Now you can ask about either or both, and every football financial question you ask earns you a chance to win a cater party for February's big game. Check out the Chris Collinsworth podcast and Western and Southern's Instagram for answers to the best questions each week. Submit your questions at westernsouthern.com/askchris. One more time, that is westernsouthern.com/askchris. If you're watching on YouTube, check out the link in the description below. Remember, at Western and Southern, you can rest assured on game day. Andrew, exciting episode as always. And we got a ton of work on PFF.com that people can check out. As always, you yourself have your fantasy football start 'em, sit 'em out for week 10. You got your buy low and sell high targets based on high value opportunities. Of course, your weekly fantasy ranks. Got the waiver wire stuff out in the week. You're a hardworking man. DFS cheat sheet still to come. Anything else you want to get off your chest, my friend?
Yeah, so I had to trade away Myles Gaskin in Dynasty earlier today because I have Javonte Williams, and basically I'm looking at my roster. I'm like, you know what? I want Melvin Gordon too. I just want both the Broncos running backs because I know the schedule is juicy. I'm a contender in this Dynasty league. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to start both of them because I have Joe Mixon as like my stalwart running back, and then I'm just kind of like rotating carousel of running backs. I played like Devontae Booker, a couple backups. So I thought I could just trade Gaskin for Melvin Gordon straight up, right? I thought that seemed like a pretty fair trade. I got rejected. Like, I could not move Gaskin, who I think is like 25 years old, for a 28-year-old Melvin Gordon. And I had to pay more to get him. I had to trade Nyheim Hines and a third-round pick for next year, and a third-round rookie pick next year. And I was like, whatever. Like, Hines, I literally never know when to play him, so I don't want him on my team. And then a rookie pick, third-rounder, it's like, eh. So, yeah, I traded to get Melvin Gordon, who's old, but now I have him and Javonte Williams. So if Melvin Gordon just literally turns to dust and like gets hurt, it doesn't even matter because I have Javonte. So I'm a winner no matter what.
Gotta love the old win-win. Yeah, with Hines, it's just one of those guys where, I mean, he'll pop off a little bit more like than someone like Kenyon Drake, but he just doesn't have that best case scenario. If Jonathan Taylor gets hurt, Hines' role would increase, but like Marlon Mack would probably end up being like the preferred starter in the equation still. It's messed up.
I mean, I've owned him in that Dynasty League since its like existence. Like, I remember drafting my first year as a rookie, and I was like, oh, this is great. I don't think I've ever started him once because I don't know when to play him. So I'm like, all right, sorry, man. Like, you're gone. Sorry. Yeah,
like the time he went off last week, it wasn't like this game where they were in comeback mode and they had to dump down a bunch of targets. He was just making the most out of it.
Yeah, no, he definitely wasn't in my lineup last week. So I was like, you know what? Sell high. Here you go. Bye.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, Andrew, everyone can go check out on Twitter at Andrew Erickson _. Catch myself at Ian Hartitz. And please, if you didn't check out all the episodes of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast this week, at least go check out the 10 Questions with Aqib Talib. It was an awesome show. And his bold pick for the week, you know, maybe not the boldest, but whatever, predicting a Deontay Johnson explosion against the Detroit Lions. And he said that before we knew Chase Claypool was going to be likely sidelined. So something to keep in mind. You heard it from Aqib first. For Andrew, I'm Ian. Thanks as always for tuning in to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.